It's Wednesday, July 23rd, 2014, 9 o'clock. We're in Senator Hearing Room at Courthouse Square, 555 Court Street Northeast for our Board of Commissioners meeting. We start the meeting with the Pledge of Allegiance, so please join us.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you very much. I'm not supposed to kind of rate the meetings. I don't see a whole lot here, at least controversial, but we'll see. Our first item is always public comment. No one has signed up to take advantage of that, so we'll move to the consent calendar. Commissioner Cameron.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll move the consent calendar. First of all, under Board of Commissioners OLCC application, recommend approval of the American Market in Salem and the Red Lobster number 673 in Salem. I wonder where 674 is. Under Business Services, approve a professional services agreement for $175,000 with the Cannon Cochran Management Service, Inc. for third-party administration of self-funded workers' compensation program. Under District Attorney, to approve Amendment Number 3, adding $100,000 to the intergovernmental agreement with the Oregon Department of Human Services for the Title IV-E Child Welfare Proceedings. Under Health, approve the Amendment Number 7, adding $6,031,215 to the intergovernmental agreement with the Oregon Health Authority to provide public health services.
I'll second the motion.
All right, it's moved and seconded to approve the consent calendar this morning. Further discussion? It says Lancaster, by the way, on that restaurant. Anything else? Don't hear any. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion passes. Okay, our first action item this morning is in health. Consider approval of an intergovernmental agreement for $328,050 with Mid-Valley Behavioral Care Network to provide rental assistance and supportive services. Carrie Moeller. Good morning. Go ahead and start when you're ready.
Good morning.
Good morning. So we're here to seek your approval for the intergovernmental agreement with the Mid-Valley Behavioral Care Network, Marion County Health Department, with Polk and Yamhill counties has entered into a supportive housing program to provide rental assistance to members in our community. The grant, this is one of 8 grants that we competed for in the fall of last year, you'll remember, where we are seeking assistance for 30 individuals. The grant includes startup funds and supportive housing services, so we can house individuals who would be at risk of higher levels of care, going to the hospital, or at risk of homelessness. In addition to the rental assistance, we'll provide supportive services to support individuals who have put together a personal centered plan, which includes their housing goals. We'll also are interested in providing culturally sensitive and supportive services to those individuals in a positive and strengths-based way. In addition to the rental assistance, participants are required to also contribute 30% of their income to the cost of housing. The subsidy is not time limited, actually. It's indefinite, while we're helping folks get other sorts of social service supports like Section 8 housing. At this time, the subsidy is not limited, and we expect that the funds will roll over into the next year, into the next biennium. That's what we're hearing from the Addictions and Mental Health Division at this time. questions?
All right, questions? Go ahead.
Yes, thank you. I've got several. First of all, these are dollars that came, these are the additional dollars that came from the legislature, and we all like crazy wrote grants. And this is the one that the Behavioral Care Network wrote on behalf of the region. Is that correct? Or 3 of the 4 counties in the region?
That's correct.
Right. So this is a great opportunity for us to get some additional resources into our region for people who are mentally ill. So can you describe in a little bit more detail how you would determine who gets the rental assistance? Who are we targeting with this money? Kind of give a little bit of a profile of the
Sure.
person, the population that you're looking at?
The rental assistance program sits inside of our AIM High, or community integration program. The individuals are at risk of hospitalization, psychiatric hospitalization, at risk of homelessness, or currently homeless. They're at risk of going into higher levels of residential care as well. The Community Integration Initiative is directed to bring folks into the community and provide stable and supportive housing. So it's really connected to those folks. We've folks who have high criminality or high drug and alcohol use aren't targeted for this population because of the level of supports that they need to be successful. So it is those folks with a primary mental illness.
Okay, so how do we know who they are, though?
They're coming to us referred from our community partners. They're referred from our mental health provider agencies. They're referred to us from our partners in the county. They're referred from other social service agencies. We've spent a great deal of time connecting with the community about this resource, and the hospitals are also referring to us.
Okay, so, and I think I heard you say there's no cap in terms of the numbers of people that we can have, or?
There's no cap in terms of the length of time we
The
can
length of
provide
time.
support
All right,
for
but there is a
individuals.
cap because the money's limited on how many people, so.
30 individuals.
Right, so how, is it first come, first serve, or do you, who makes
Yes.
that determination?
It's first come, first served. Don Cottrell's the supervisor of the program. They're screening folks for, to meet the criteria.
Okay, and then, maybe you said this and I missed it, but do they go into private housing, kind of like Section 8, and get a subsidy? Is it government-owned housing? Is it all of the above?
It's Section 8. The goal is to connect them eventually with Section 8. The waiting list for Section 8 is quite long, as you know.
Right, exactly.
So it's that bridge funding between the current housing opportunity and Section 8. And actually, we are, the intent is to have folks be in scattered site housing, so not congregate disabled housing in the community throughout the city and the county.
Okay, so, okay. I had another follow-up question and I just lost it. So anyway, Section 8. Oh, I know what I was going to say. So so most of the people may be actually signed up for Section 8, be on the waiting list. It takes 1 year to 2 years. So this would, when you're saying a bridge, this would subsidize their rent for that period of time. Then they go into Section 8, and then you can roll the dollars into additional people.
That's correct.
the-
And if folks aren't signed up by the time, that's one of the primary focuses of our staffing support, is to get them connected to Section 8.
Okay, great. And then you talked about supportive housing services. Could you give us just a flavor for examples of what staff would do to support people in housing?
Yes, so besides helping them apply for Section 8, they're helping them find housing. They're providing other case management services to help folks be stable, so applying for other subsidies, food stamps and other supportive services that would help people. Some people come who've had poor rental histories, so we're helping them with utility payments and paying past debt as it related to their other housing. Those have been barriers for folks to get into Section 8 or to maintain new housing. So so staff are helping people sort of satisfy and resolve some of those old issues. There's also a peer support person connected to this work. And again, between the case manager and the peer support specialist, they're providing that full wraparound supports to help people get into their housing.
Okay, great. So when you talk about case management, it could be any range of things, right? From someone who's mentally ill oftentimes has a hard time just because their emotions oftentimes are up or down. A lot of times they're taking medication. Their income, if they're living on a very low income, it's difficult to make ends meet. And so I think case management is so important for people to be able to stay within the budget. If a crisis happens, well, everything kind of becomes a crisis, you know. So somebody, their phone gets disconnected, or they run out of minutes and they can't call people, or the trip link that's supposed to take them to an appointment can't come at the time that they need it. You know, it's somebody that's there that actually then can help them logically think through what actions they can take to resolve the problem. So I just think there's so many little things that people don't realize that people who are mentally ill and have low incomes really need help with.
That's great.
And appreciate all of the staff support that our staff at Marion County and others are able to provide. We have, as you mentioned, a lot of community partners that we contract with, and at other meetings we actually approve those contracts. So, you know, we're familiar with a number of those organizations, but those staff provide a lot of service to people, and it's very much appreciated. So this sounds like it's a great addition to what we're doing already in terms of helping people get into stable and safe housing.
Yes, it's bridging a really significant gap.
Right. Thank you.
I think, Mr. Chair, if I may, and yeah, the question would be on the financial impacts, the $118,000 for staff. Are we adding? Oh. I shouldn't turn it off, Mark.
No.
I'll start over again. Yeah. Thanks, Carrie, for being here, by the way. Under the financial impacts, the $118,050 for staff and administrative overhead, are we adding staff to do this, or is this existing staff that will be allocated?
We are redirecting some of our current staff work to this.
Okay, thank you.
Carrie, I had one question, and I probably I know the answer, but you were talking about how people get linked up, referred, but it's usually through the system. Would a family, is there a place for families to inquire,
Yes.
knowing someone like that and directly without any other, I'm making that up, but can a family just say, hey, I got a problem here, and can you help?
Yes, one of the significant aspects of this program is folks do not need to be connected formally to a agency or social services in order to qualify. So families can refer, and we would accept those calls here at
And where would they call? Do you know off the top of your head?
through our program, CAPS, Community and Provider Services. So
Okay.
they could find that number on the website.
Okay, thank you. Anything else?
All right, so, Mr. Chair, I would move that we approve the intergovernmental agreement for $328,050 with Mid-Valley Behavioral Care Network to provide rental assistant and supportive housing services.
I'll second.
Case moved and seconded to approve this intergovernmental agreement. Any further discussion? I hear none. All then in favor say aye.
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 Aye, motion passes, okay? Thank you, Carrie, and others. Well, it's 9:15. The next item we have is a public hearing having to do with the floodplain overlay. It's scheduled at 9:30, so unless, pardon me?
So that's one to wait for.
Yeah, what do they say? Don't leave us.
Hang on, people.
Don't
It's
turn the
coming.
channel. It could be good. Brandon's here all lined up with a lot of information.
Actually,
but-
it's a very important issue for people that live in flood zones, and we have had a number of significant floods over the last several years. And Mr. Cameron, you in your house district particularly.
Yes.
So unless we want to entertain.
You want to hear about striking out meth for a minute, or you want to?
Well, let's do that.
All
That'd
right.
be fine.
It is this Friday. We're going to read it on the calendars, but I just want to make sure that everyone is aware that This Friday, it won't be raining, by the way, so it'll be nice
gonna be
again. And come to a baseball game out at Volcano Stadium. The gates open at 5:15 p.m. At the baseball game, there'll be displays from all kinds of public safety partners, police, fire. There's fireworks at the end. There'll be prizes. They're inviting lots of children and youth. So it's foster children, just all kinds of youth that are involved in the community. There'll be demonstrations. There'll be a helicopter that comes in and brings former Commissioner Patty Milne, and she will be doing the first pitch. So that will be something to watch. And it's the whole focus of the evening is to be striking out meth and other drugs in Marion and Polk counties. So well, invite everyone to come. It should be a great evening.
A couple of things come to mind. One, we're expanding it, including partnership with Polk County. Now, we don't usually care about them quite as much, but this is an
always
exception.
care
We
about
do?
Polk
Okay,
County,
I just
yes.
never know how we feel. And then,
Care very much.
and then CAO Latimer will be attending. Do you have an official role, or just
No
watching
pie to
baseball?
taste or pickles or anything this time, right?
Not pitching any balls?
Going to enjoy the game.
All right.
No, you won't be there to do it, so I won't either.
I'll be there.
But
Yeah, I know who he's talking about. All right, I think we need to go to a commercial break. And we'll resume at 9:30 for public hearing on floodplains. Hearing on floodplain overlay zone amendments. Brandon Reich is here to talk about it. I make fun of it, but I know it's important, so Brandon, go ahead.
Good morning, Commissioners. For the record, Brandon Reich, staff representing the Planning Division of Public Works. On June 11, 2014, the Marion County Board of Commissioners approved resolution initiating the county's consideration of amendments to the Marion County floodplain overlay zones. The board scheduled a public hearing for today to consider the amendments to the Marion County urban and rural floodplain overlay zones. There are 3 amendments. First, to the definitions of substantial improvement and substantial damage. Second, to the development that is exempt from requiring a floodplain permit. And third, to the structures that are exempt from needing an elevation certificate. I will briefly describe each of the amendments. First, regarding the definitions of substantial damage and substantial improvement. When property owners make improvements to an existing home in a floodplain, sometimes the existing home must be brought up to current floodplain development standards, such as elevating the home above the base flood elevation. Other times, improvements do not require the existing home be elevated. The trigger for determining whether an existing home is brought up to current floodplain standards is the ratio of the value of the improvement to the value of the existing home. Currently, Marion County requires that when the improvement value done to the home of a remodel or an addition exceeds 20% the value of the existing home, the home must be brought up to current development standards. Federal law sets the trigger point higher at 50% the value of the home. At a 50% value, people are able to do more improvements to their home before it has to be brought up to current standards. Similarly, when a home is damaged by a flood or fire or other disaster, if that cost to repair the home exceeds 50% of the value of the home before the damage occurred, the home must be brought up to current development standards. Changing the county's current level of 20% to the federal value of 50% is consistent with the requirements of federal law, and the board may find that it provides the correct balance between requiring homeowners to make existing structures safer from flooding while acknowledging the expense of making a dwelling compliant with current floodplain development standards. Second, regarding development that does not require a floodplain permit. The county is able to exempt some kinds of development in a floodplain from requiring a permit. The National Flood Insurance Program does not provide a list, but generally a community can look at structures that are of relatively low value and that have a low damage potential during a flood. Currently, the county exempts structures such as signs, street repair, dredging, and telephone poles. In addition, staff proposes exempting from the requirements of obtaining a floodplain development permit flagpoles, open wire and open rail fencing, and accessory structures smaller than 50 square feet, such as well houses, because these structures are not likely to cause damage during a flood and are of relatively low value. Finally, regarding development that does not require an elevation certificate, the National Flood Insurance Program requires elevation certificates for structures in floodplains to ensure that they are being built to the correct standards and in order to assess the building for insurance purposes. The National Flood Insurance Program does not require elevation certificates for every kind of structure, though. For instance, water-dependent uses such as boat ramps and docks are constructed at the level of the water, not elevated, and do not require an elevation certificate. Similarly, other uses do not require elevation certificates. Staff proposes to adopt exemptions to the requirement for an elevation certificate into the urban floodplain overlay zone, consistent with what was previously adopted into the rural floodplain overlay zone, so that they match. Staff recommends the board adopt the changes to the definitions of substantial improvement and substantial damage, adopt additional exemptions for structures from the requirement of obtaining a floodplain development permit, and amend the urban chapter of the floodplain overlay zone to exempt certain structures from the requirement to obtain a floodplain elevation certificate consistent with amendments already made to the rural floodplain overlay zone. With that, I'm available for any questions you may have.
Well, I do have one. We'll go ahead. Just as simple. So you talked about obviously docks and those kind of things being at the water level. What about a garage that you park a car in? Obviously, it can't be elevated. I see out at the coast a lot of them, they park the car underneath, but you also can't have, water has to be able to pass through, so they typically don't want you building walls. So could that be rebuilt even if you want a secure garage?
Sure. So at the coast, they do have requirements that are more stringent than we do in inland. And those areas where they park their cars have to remain open and unenclosed, except for a small area like for access for a staircase into the house. But what we can do here in the valley is we can allow a garage does not have to be elevated. It can be built on the ground level. And then the first 1 or 2 feet have to be flood-proofed, so that they can get wet and dry out without causing significant damage to the structure. So they use concrete masonry units or pressure-treated wood or something in those first 2 feet that are going to be exposed to the water. And then the garage has to have openings in it so that the water can get in and out, and the water won't build up behind the garage and potentially cause it to collapse. It's called wet flood proofing because the structure gets wet and then it dries out, but the water does get into the structure. So that way people don't have to elevate and on a lot of fill or try to drive up to a garage, and a barn's the same way. It can be on ground level with the recognition that there's some safety aspects there and some ways to protect the structure and to some extent protect the contents.
All right, thank you, Commissioner.
So first of all, Brandon, I want to say thank you for bringing this forward. I know that you've brought it to the board several times, and we've kind of worked through what the appropriate balance was for these percentages that you went through, and I appreciate your work on it. We were kind of making light of the floodplain overlay zone. Kind of sounds a little bit dry, but I mean, it really is, as we talked about, a major issue. And there have been floods, not just here in Marion County, but all over the United States. And FEMA, which is the organization that has the flood insurance plan and all of that, what does FEMA stand for? Federal
Emergency Management Administration.
Thank you, Federal Emergency Management Administration. They were inundated, right, with claims and people just losing massive amounts of property because of floods. So they've been trying to do various things to get people better prepared, to reduce their cost if something like this happens, because people are better prepared. So first question that I have, and some of these are just to kind of establish things that I'm pretty sure I know. This really applies outside the city limits, right? This is in the unincorporated areas of Marion County?
Outside the cities, the rural area and the areas in the urban growth boundary outside city limits.
Correct. And so in those areas, we talked about Turner and the break, and Kaiser, LaBiche has a lot of flooding. East Salem probably has some flooding. Kind of where are the points just kind of highlighted around the county where this would be most apt to apply?
Around the county, the predominant floodplains we have are in the Pudding, which are east of Salem, northeast of Salem, coming down from Aurora out south, all along the Willamette, along the Santiam, the Mill Creek, especially from Almsville through Staten and Turner up into Salem, all have a lot of the predominance of the flooding for the county.
So for example, you say Turner, but we would only be applying this to people that live outside the city limits of Turner. So Turner's going to create their own requirements, correct?
Turner has to have their own floodplain program.
Right. So then can you talk about, so some of the things that we talked about in trying to land on what's appropriate in terms of a percentage, in terms of substantial improvement. So, and we talked a little bit about it with the garages, but it's interesting to think about, I mean, somebody owns a home, it's in the floodplain, it's on a foundation, it's not a huge home, and then we come in and say, well, you have to elevate your home. Why? I've been to Hawaii, and most of the homes that when you drive down along the coastline are elevated, and you see them and you go, wow, because it comes in and it floods. But you don't see a lot of elevated homes in Marion County, and I can imagine it's fairly expensive to lift your home off the foundation and do some of these things. So can you talk about you talked about some ways that people can do things that maybe aren't quite as expensive as that. And also in terms of how does it make a difference whether it's 20% or 50%, the ratio that we've chosen, how does that make a difference for the average homeowner?
Okay. So when it comes to having to bring a home up to current standards, there's different types of improvements that can be done to the home. And a lot of those types of improvements the big ones don't necessarily trigger the home being elevated. So for instance, if you add a lateral addition, a side-by-side addition, got a home and you add a side-by-side addition to the home, and that addition has its own foundation and doesn't structurally impact the existing home, they have a doorway between the two, it can look very natural, but structurally they're separate. Only the addition has to be brought up to current floodplain standards. The existing home doesn't have to be. And that can be a real benefit to homeowners. And this has been around for a long time. Not having to have the expense of elevating the existing home. You've got a couple stairs maybe up into the new addition. That happens very frequently. When you've got an existing home and you do a lot of work to that home, you add a second addition or you do a major remodel, counting the things that FEMA counts toward the home, things that are affixed to the structure. So like some things like carpeting, painting, and if I remember correctly, don't count toward the amount that would trigger having to raise the home. But other work, a lot of work you do on the home would count toward that. When you do that kind of work, or you add in a second story addition, that's all part of that primary home, and then FEMA requires that be elevated and brought up to current standards. So I look back at permits we've done the last, I think about 5 or 6 years I look back, and to try to see have we had this trigger, this 20% trigger or 50% trigger or anything. And the majority of the additions we've had have either been very, very minor, like adding a carport, for instance, maybe, or adding a lateral addition of the type that doesn't make the original home need to be elevated. And they were all well under the 20%. One was a major remodel of an older home. The older home was from the 1800s or early 1900s, and it didn't have a lot of value in that home. And it was well over 100% the value of the improvement to the value of the existing home. So what I saw from all the permits I looked at, and we do maybe 5 or 6 homes per year, so 30 or 40 homes, only one triggered the threshold, and that triggered it at over 100%. So I think for the county, because of the way lateral additions occur and the way we can manage that, whether it's 20% or 50%, the impact to the homeowner won't be significantly different for them. Most of the time, when the remodel happens, it's so much and it's well beyond. And the other times, a lot of them are small enough that they'll be under 20, they'd be under 50 both.
Okay. And can we move to substantial damage? So this is when the flood has actually occurred and you have damage to your property, and then insurance is involved also. Sometimes private insurance, sometimes people are making claims to FEMA, right? So how do these ratios get impacted when, how does that affect the homeowner when there is the potential of substantial damage?
When a home, so FEMA has expanded the definition of damage to be both floods, earthquakes, fires, anything that can damage the home. FEMA made this change some years back, and we didn't catch it. So this would update our code to be consistent with FEMA. So even if a home caught fire and the fire exceeded 50% the value of the structure, when they put the money back in to repair the structure, FEMA requires that the home be brought up to current standards. It's similar to my understanding of a building code where if you have some damage, sometimes you have to meet current standards when you repair the home. And it's a similar situation here. We go out, as a county, we go out, we look at the damage that's occurred to a structure. We kind of give it we have a lot of homes to look at. We give it a quick estimate. If, for instance, if they've had 3 feet of water in a home, we have an idea that there's a significant amount of damage to that home. We know the assessed value of the home. We can kind of generate, you're likely looking at some significant damage, especially with over a foot of water. There's quite a bit of damage. The water can travel up the wall, up the sheetrock, and into the insulation. And so at that point, we contact the homeowner, property owner, and say, looks like there could be some things you need to do moving forward because of the amount of damage that your home may have sustained. They have the ability to work with the county and show, oh, look, our houses, we had an appraisal, it's worth quite a bit more than what the assessor records show. And so the amount of damage we had wasn't as bad. You saw just one part of the house, but the other part of the house, it's the majority is higher up, or something like that. They can discuss that with the county, and we wouldn't have to require anything. FEMA does require that we go out and make a fair attempt, or make an honest attempt at making those assessments of the dwellings that are damaged. If they do exceed the 50% ratio, then they have an option they have some options to look at what type of repair they want to do. They're not required to bring the house back up to the current level of development. They have to bring it up to current standards, but they don't have to make it, say, as nice as it was before temporarily. If they want to bring it back, make it something livable, and they don't achieve that 50% trigger, then they could still do a kind of a minimum amount of work to bring that structure back up to be able to be lived in. Has to meet code, has to be safe, but it may not cause that trigger of 50% to occur. If it does get triggered, and a lot of property owners, they've got the money coming in with the insurance claim and such. There's increased cost of compliance, something that you can get through insurance. For some property owners with insurance, if they are indicated or the trigger for damage occurs, that's a good thing for them because they can get up to something $35,000 additional money from FEMA for the increased cost of compliance. And that's on top of what it takes to repair the home. And that money can be used directly to elevate the home, to put openings in, and to get it out of harm's way in the future. Having flood insurance and being damaged can be your best bet for recovery. Without flood insurance, you don't have that money coming in to repair the home, and you don't have the increased cost of compliance potential to be able to elevate and repair that home up to a higher standard so that it won't be damaged in the future.
So my last question, because you're talking about insurance, great segue. So how does this particular change impact people's insurance rates at all, or their ability to get insurance by us? We're essentially making the standards a bit less stringent. So that's the first half of my question. Second half is that this might be an opportunity just to put in a plug about how Marion County has this insurance program that we've had that allows people living in the floodplain to get reductions on their rates.
Well, we're being less stringent, yes, we're opening that up some, but I believe it will not affect people's insurance because it's applied to existing structures. The new structures that are built to current FEMA code, and being elevated 2 foot above the base flood elevation saves people up to maybe half off what their flood insurance premiums would be anyway if they met the minimum state requirement of 1 foot. So that right there is a significant savings for people. This applies to existing structures which are grandfathered somewhat. There's been some changes in federal law. Biggert Waters and Grim Waters, 2 different national floodplain amendments at the federal level, are making some changes on how properties are grandfathered. My understanding is, I'm not an expert on the insurance part, but my understanding is some of the grandfathering has come back. It went away with Biggert Waters, and some of it has come back with Grim Waters. Whether it'll stay around, grandfathering, after 2016, 2017, I don't know. People's rates are still going up from Grim Waters, the second one that came around. But there is some grandfathering still going on. What this will do, perhaps the biggest drawback would be after a flood, when there's damage, we can't declare it, if they have insurance, for instance, and they'd like it to be substantially damaged, so they can get the increased cost of compliance, $30,000. They won't qualify for that until the damage is 50% of the value of the structure instead of 20%. That would probably be the biggest impact to people, not being able to get that additional insurance money. Okay. Finally, about the community
Rating system, right, yeah.
Sure. The county is one of a handful of counties and cities in the state that participates in the community rating system of FEMA. Community rating system is a voluntary program that takes a look at the county programs that we enact and gives us a rating based on how involved we are in protecting people from flooding and protecting property and life. And that rating translates into an insurance savings. So right now, people in the county save 20%. If you're in a floodplain, you save 20% off your insurance premium for the Marion County participating in the community rating system and having standards that go somewhat above the minimum, the federal minimum, and protect people better from flooding and property better from flooding. If you're outside a floodplain, you save 10%. You don't save as much, but then generally, ideally, your rates are lower. What I'd like to say about the grim waters, the bigger waters, the grandfathering, I don't think anyone really knows at this point where the future is going for grandfathering. Most of it was taken away with the bigger waters. Some of it may have come back. It's important for people to talk to their insurance agents to keep up on what their premiums are and how they may be changing, because the changes are occurring fairly rapidly, and there may be some more changes that are already ready to go in the future in a year or two that people we want to be made aware of. To save some money on your insurance, elevating an existing home, putting openings in it, there's different ways that I can work with you, the building department can work with you with ideas on how to bring your insurance down, possibly significantly. And there are some assistance we can do with looking at maps to see if what the lender said for your property being located in a floodplain is the same as what we're seeing on our maps. So there's some assistance we can provide people there as well.
Great, thanks.
Commissioner Cameron.
Thank you, Brandon. So you mentioned the discount in the Marion County program because of the standards that we have. Yet we have a standard today that is higher than the federal standard. We're gonna change that and move it back to meet the federal standard. Is that going to affect that discount?
I checked on that before we started this process, and we do lose a few points out of the total of a couple thousand, and the amount we lose will not impact our score.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
I might just add, the whole idea, at least that I had, was try not to almost pile on to people in times of trouble. With the threshold at 20%, well, that isn't so much. And so to find out that you not only have to clean it up, get it right, but maybe spend substantial money and time in bringing up to standard like we're talking about. I'm disappointed to hear that it might cost people on the other end. But like you were saying, if it's that big, it probably, 2-3 feet in there or that substantial a flood, it's probably past that 50% mark anyway. So, but the idea was to just not make it worse for people who are already having bad times. Anything else?
That's good.
We have no one signed up to speak. Brandon, do you have any other thoughts?
I don't. Thank you.
All right. Then I think we're ready to close the hearing and see where we're going.
Is this an action item today?
Yes, they just want to close the public hearing.
I'll move that we close the public hearing on consider floodplain overlay zone amendments.
I assume you mean to approve them then, the amendments?
I didn't know that we had an action item on it. I just thought it was a
Yeah.
public hearing today.
All right.
All right, let me restate I'll move that we close the public hearing to consider floodplain overlay zone amendments and approve the amendments.
All right.
I'll second the motion.
All right, it's moved and seconded to close the public hearing and approve the amendments to our floodplain overlay zone. Anything else this morning? See none, hear none, all in favor then say aye.
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 Aye, motion passes. Again, thank you, Brandon, for all your work on this, and
Thank you.
let's hope we don't have any floods. That'd make it all easier. Anything else anybody wants to talk about this morning? Nope. Okay, well then the last to do is to read the places we'll be together in the next week. Slipping into the second page. Today, the 23rd of July, at 4:30 to 6 is Catholic Community Services event at Woodmansee Park, 4629 Sunnyside Road in Salem. Tomorrow morning, 10 o'clock to 11:15, Congressional District Staff Briefing, Silverton Conference Room, 5th floor, 555 Court Street in Salem. And that's followed at 11:30 with a Juvenile Department Employee Barbecue at the Fresh Start Market, Connections Conference Room, 3030 Center Street in Salem. As we mentioned, Friday, 5:30 to 8:30 is the 9th Annual Striking Out Meth in Marion and Polk Counties. Volcano Stadium, 6700 Field of Dreams Way in Kaiser. Monday morning, 8:30, Commissioner's Calendar Review in the Silverton Conference Room, Courthouse Square, 5th floor, 555 Court Street in Salem. That's followed at 9 o'clock by Management Update in the same location. And then at 11 o'clock, a Board of Commissioners Chief Administrative Officers meeting, executive session if needed, pursuant to ORS 1926660 2A, B, F, and I. And that'll also be in the Silverton Conference Room. Tuesday, 10 o'clock, a Housing Authority meeting, Silverton Conference Room. Next Wednesday is our next board session, and also Wednesday, the 30th, 3 o'clock, a work session having to do with capital improvement projects at the Health Department, again, Silverton Conference Room, 555 Court Street Northeast in Salem. All right. I've asked you a couple times, nobody had anything, so let's.
Well, all I
oh,
would
there
just
we-
say is that it's raining today, and we're
And?
hoping that people still come out to the Catholic Community Services event, right?
It's supposed to get better in the
You
afternoon.
think it's supposed to get better in the
Yeah.
afternoon? Okay, well, we have our church picnic tonight at 6 too, so we're kind of going,
Well, I
right.
can't make all sorts of
Right,
guarantees.
so you can, Bush Park, is it gonna be all right there?
Yeah, I'm pretty happy about it. You're under the trees, you can make something up.
All right,
But it'll be warm enough.
okay.
Yeah. No, I can't. Well, we could pass some kind of resolution and just say it can't rain this afternoon.
Yeah.
Well,
how
generally,
that
when you
works.
pass the
I
one
know,
that
I know.
spells it an emergency, then it doesn't rain, so.
That's right. Yeah, I can't help you. All right, anything else? Then I hear none, we'll call the meeting adjourned.